I'm not sure, I think I know what the amendment's trying to do. But was this something that was offered under a previous piece of legislation that may have been drafted in a way that would accomplish what the amendment tries to do right now? I'm not sure if my colleague had tried to tackle this issue last Congress when they were in control. I think it goes back to the bigger piece and the full bill, which is I've seen the REINS Act and I've seen it work. And the problem oftentimes can be that even the lawmaker, the legislator, really doesn't do the work up front. They don't draft the legislation in a way that could be clear and all-inclusive and kind of either lays a path for those agencies that may end up doing the rulemaking and being able to, and what the REINS Act would do is it allows you to put in place some type of scope statement that would actually then go back to the legislature so they could take a look at it and say, this does meet the legislative intent.
Would the gentleman yield?
This meets the legislative intent. And if everyone then is on the same page, fine, then move forward with the legislation and ultimately it may pass both houses and be signed into law. But, I don't think we look kind of in the mirror on some of this stuff, on some of these bills and say, did you do a good job when you drafted it in the first place?
Would the gentleman yield?
And I think that's part of this conversation, so.
Would the gentleman yield for a moment?
No, I won't yield. I think the other thing would be, you can have a fiscal trigger too, right? It may not apply to every piece of legislation that makes its way through the body, through either the House or the Senate. But that's the way it works in some states, and they've had great success. I mean, I think one of the things that's most troubling about what I've been hearing today is that there are a group, some elected officials, I've seen it before, who cozy up to the bureaucracy. They believe that the answers are all within the bureaucracy, so they cozy up to it. They say, without the bureaucracy, this will not work. And I think that's the opposite view that I take, and I hope that many other elected officials take, is that you should be a skeptic. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't good people in the bureaucracy and people with expertise and people that we rely on a regular basis when there's a very technical type of legislation, piece of legislation. But, to cozy up to them, that's not your job. That's not why you were elected, to become complicit with the bureaucracy. You're here to work with your colleagues to draft legislation and make sure that what you drafted is ultimately met with the same goals that the rulemaking is drawn up on. And if we don't have that second kick at the cat, if we don't have that second opportunity to kind of dig into this and say, does this meet kind of the goals that we ultimately set as a legislative body, I don't think we're doing our job. So with that, I think that, my colleague, well-intentioned, I think, in trying to somehow address a very specific issue that obviously would pull at the heartstrings of anybody, may be well-intentioned, but again, I think the overall goal here is to come up with a piece of legislation that holds the bureaucracy accountable. And that's why I think the REINS Act, it's working in states all over this nation. It works great. It really is. It's a piece of legislation that's been drafted and run through many state houses, and it works very well at that level. So that's why I think the bill's a good idea, and I yield back.